He died in 2020, but the headlines won't let him rest. Dark Secrets, Truth, finally revealed. What they didn't tell you. With icons like Sean Connery, rumor rushes in where memory gets complicated. Tonight we'll do what those clips rarely attempt, separate what's on the record from what's hearsay, and lay out the controversies that have followed his legacy since his passing. If you admired the first James Bond, the man whose voice alone could carry a scene, you can hold that admiration and still look squarely at the parts of the story that sting. No need for invented bombshells. The receipts, his own words, documented allegations, and long-running disputes are complicated enough. First, a clear timeline. Connery died on October 31, 2020, at age 90, at his home in the Bahamas. If you've seen 3 years ago in a thumbnail, that's a rolling hook, accurate only for 2023. The reason his name still trends isn't mystery. It's the unresolved friction between the legend and the man. His career made him a symbol of suave power. Off-screen, a handful of on-the-record moments and accusations drew a very different picture. And those are the dark secrets many videos are pointing toward without context. Here's the context. The most cited and most damning are Connery's own words about violence toward women. In a 1965 Playboy interview, he suggested there could be circumstances where hitting a woman might be acceptable. In a 1987 Barbara Walters interview, he stood by that view. Those clips have circulated for decades. Later in his life, Connery publicly rejected the stance, issuing statements that he did not condone violence against women under any circumstances. That reversal matters. So does the fact that the earlier comments were his, on camera and in print. You don't need speculation when the record is that stark. A viewpoint that aged terribly, reiterated, then renounced. The second thread is personal and painful. Connery's first wife, actor Diane Cilento, wrote in her 2006 memoir that he subjected her to physical and emotional abuse during their marriage in the 1960s. Connery denied her claims. That puts us in a familiar but fraught zone. One person's detailed allegations in print, the other's categorical rejection. There is no court finding to adjudicate it. What's responsible here is to name what exists: a published allegation, a denial, and how it has impacted his posthumous reputation, especially when read alongside those earlier interviews. Many fans encountering the combination reassessed the Bond star they grew up admiring. A third, less lurid but long-lived controversy: money, residency, and politics. Connery was vocally pro-Scottish independence and contributed to related causes. Opponents made hay of his tax residency, noting that he spent long stretches abroad and ultimately based himself in the Bahamas. Connery always maintained that he complied with the law. The debate wasn't about a criminal case against him, it was about optics and principle. Can a champion of Scottish public life live outside the tax net without inviting criticism? In politics, optics often win the headline, and Connery's choices fed that argument for decades. Then there's Spain. After Connery sold a longtime property near Marbella, Spanish authorities opened a sweeping investigation into alleged real estate and zoning irregularities tied to the site's redevelopment. Connery provided a lengthy written statement to the court and was never charged. The case primarily engulfed local officials, lawyers, and developers over the years. Its complexity outlasted headlines, which often reduced it to Connery under investigation even as proceedings moved elsewhere. It's a useful example of how a star's name can overshadow what a court is actually examining, and how easy it is for rumor to mislabel asked for information as guilty. There are also the bitter pay disputes that shadowed his Bond era. Connery battled producers over money and creative control, resented the invasive press that came with the franchise, walked away, and then returned for a record fee that helped seed a Scottish education trust. None of that is a secret. It's part of a long-documented wrangle over how much a global franchise should pay the face that made it credible. It humanizes, rather than villainizes, a working actor fighting studio power at a time when stars often didn't. Put together, these strands explain why Dark Secrets thumbnails still multiply. They compress genuine controversies: his past statements condoning slapping women, Cilento's allegations and his denial, tax residency optics, the Spanish property probe where he wasn't charged, and fractious studio battles, into a single breathless reveal. But the real picture is heavier and cleaner. There were specific documented reasons people questioned Connery in life and after. Some are incontestable, some are alleged and denied, some are political theater, some are legal but not criminal for him. If we're going to take his legacy seriously, we should handle all of it plainly. In the next section, we'll walk each controversy with dates and sources, then set them against the work, how the Bond template he helped invent shaped masculinity on screen, for better and worse, and how later roles complicated that silhouette. Hold respect in one hand, accountability in the other. It's the only way a legend becomes a human being again. As promised, here is the controversy map with dates, and what's actually on the record, versus what is disputed. Think of it as 4 buckets. Connery's own statements about violence toward women, allegations from his first marriage that he denied the Spanish real estate probe that used his name, but did not charge him, and the long optics fight about tax residency and Scottish politics. Add to that, an older, less salacious thread, fractious pay battles with the Bond producers, and you have the material that keeps Dark Secrets videos running. None of this requires invention. It does require sequence and precision. Start with what is incontestable, his interviews. In a 1965 Playboy Q&A, Connery said he could imagine circumstances where an open-handed slap might be justified. In 1987, Barbara Walters pressed him on ABC. He doubled down saying he had not changed his mind. Those clips have shadowed his legacy for decades because they are verbatim. In the mid-2000s, as the quotes resurfaced, Connery issued public statements saying he did not believe any level of abuse of women was acceptable, and that the older remarks were wrong and out of date. The reversal matters, but so do the original words. When people cite Dark Secrets, this is usually the first and surest receipt. Next, the most painful claims. Diane Salento's memoir, published in 2006, alleged that Connery subjected her to physical and emotional abuse during their 1962-73 marriage. Connery categorically denied her account. There was no subsequent court case to adjudicate the claims, and no legal finding. That leaves a disputed, deeply personal record. A detailed allegation by an ex-spouse in print, met by a blanket denial from Connery. Many fans who encountered Salento's story alongside the old interview clips reassessed the star they admired. Others point to the absence of legal findings. The responsible way to summarize it is simple. Allegation made, denial issued, no court resolution. Spain's Goldfinger affair created years of confusing headlines. After Connery sold a long-time Marbella property in 1999, local developers replaced it with an apartment complex. Spanish authorities later opened a wide-ranging inquiry into alleged planning, zoning, and money laundering offenses tied to that redevelopment and the city's politics. Connery and his wife were asked for information. In 2010, he submitted a lengthy sworn statement through lawyers. He was not charged. The bulk of the case focused on Marbella officials, lawyers, and developers. International coverage often compressed asked to give evidence into under investigation and in some tellings into charged. That progression is not supported by court records concerning Connery himself. Tax residency and politics is the oldest simmer. Connery was a vocal backer of Scottish independence and of the Scottish National Party, while spending long stretches abroad and ultimately basing himself in the Bahamas. Opponents branded him a tax exile. Connery maintained he complied fully with tax laws and hadn't been a UK resident for years, paying where he lived. Again, no criminal case attached to his name. The fight was about optics and principle. Can you be an icon of Scottish public life while living and paying taxes elsewhere? In politics, optics often win the headline even when the law is beside the point. How have reputable outlets treated all this since 2020? Obituaries from major papers and film academies balance celebration: an Oscar for The Untouchables 1988, a BAFTA for The Name of the Rose 1987, a knighthood and 2,000 years as a reliable box office anchor with the controversies above. Post-Me Too retrospectives in particular re-evaluated the older interviews through a modern lens and foregrounded Salento's account alongside his denial. His estate and family kept remembrances focused on his career and private kindnesses. Former colleagues praised his professionalism and ferocious preparation. That mix, plaudits, receipts, and unresolved claims, is what responsible summaries look like. The point isn't to relitigate a life, it's to avoid airbrushing it in public remembrance today. Finally, the Bond money wars. Connery argued for higher pay and creative respect as the franchise exploded, clashed with producers, quit, then returned for Diamonds Are Forever, 1971 on a record-setting deal. He publicly directed a large portion of that fee toward the Scottish International Education Trust, which he had helped establish to support artists and students, a reminder that a dark secret reel can miss the prosaic truth. Much of a star's off-screen story is contract friction and philanthropy, not mystery. Put together, these strands explain the posthumous churn, some facts impossible to ignore, some allegations disputed, some optics weaponized, and some headlines conflating inquiry with guilt. In the next section, we'll set this against the work, how the Bond archetype he embodied shaped ideas of masculinity, how later roles complicated that silhouette, and how culture's lens has shifted since 1962. Set the controversies against the work and the picture sharpens. Connery didn't just play James Bond, he helped invent a cinematic blueprint for mid-century masculinity, magnetic, controlled, entitled, funny, when it suited him, lethal when it didn't. Dr. No 1962 and From Russia with Love, 1963 framed the silhouette, Goldfinger 1964 and Thunderball 1965 turned it into a global language. You can see the appeal economy of movement, a raised eyebrow that did more than a speech, the sense that competence itself could be erotic. You can also see with a modern lens, the rot in parts of that template, casual sexism, conquest, as character beat, power without accountability. The tension between that screen persona and Connery's early real-world comments about slapping women is precisely why those clips still sting. The art and the attitude reinforced each other in a way that feels inseparable to many viewers today. Culture moved, and the franchise moved with it. Later Bonds shifted towards self-awareness, and eventually emotional consequence. Connery, meanwhile, spent the 1970s and beyond complicating his own silhouette. The Man Who Would Be King 1975 paired him with Michael Caine for a Kipling adventure with hubris at the center. Robin and Marion 1976 let him play age, regret, and tenderness opposite Audrey Hepburn. Outland 1981 reimagined High Noon in Space, with Connery as a weary lawman. Then came the awards run The Name of the Rose. 1986 won him a BAFTA. The Untouchables 1987 won him an Oscar for a performance equal parts gravel and grace. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. 1989 let him invert the alpha act as a fussy, funny father. The Hunt for Red October 1990 gave him authority so calm it felt mythic. The Rock 1996 found the wink again. Finding Forrester 2000 argued for mentorship over swagger. Even The Misfires, Highlander's Mad Charm, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen 2003 are instructive because they show a star trying to square an indelible persona with blockbuster machinery changing under his feet. None of that erases the earlier statements or the allegations he denied. It does remind you that a screen legacy is plural, and that audiences already know how to hold contradictions if you give them the tools. One tool is sequence. Show the work in order, and you'll see how a single performance can be both the apex of an era and a snapshot of its blind spots. Another tool is context, a streaming intro, a museum note, a classroom minute that says plainly, "This film helped define cool." It also encodes attitudes that harm. That isn't censorship. It's literacy. Connery himself both cooperated with and resisted myth. He fought producers over money and creative control during the Bond years, returned for Diamonds Are Forever, 1971 on a record fee, and publicly directed a significant portion toward the Scottish International Education Trust he helped found. He accepted a knighthood in 2000 after years of political noise around his advocacy for Scottish independence. He retired rather than make films he didn't believe in after 2003's League, surfacing only for voice work later. Each of those choices undercuts the idea that he drifted on image alone. He was a calculating professional who could be generous, stubborn, and by most colleagues' accounts, ferociously prepared. What do we do with legends whose shadows lengthen once the lights go up? First, we stop pretending that dark secrets are always hidden files. In Connery's case, much of what complicates his reputation was public long before 2020. The 1965 Playboy quote, the 1987 Walters interview, the later reversal, Salento's 2006 memoir and his denial, the Spain probe that never charged him. The tax residency optics that were political theater more than legal indictment. Second, we let the work keep teaching and the record keep sobering. You can admire the economy of his presence and still say out loud that parts of what he embodied on screen and said off it belong to a worldview we're right to outgrow. Finally, we resist the algorithm's urge to jam complexity into a reveal. For some, Connery will remain the definitive Bond, a North Star of screen confidence. For others, the older interviews will always wash the charm in a colder light. Most of us live in the middle. We keep the films, note the damage, and use the friction to make future icons less easy to confuse with their worst era's attitudes. That's not an evasion, it's how cultural memory matures. In the next section, we'll trace the post-2020 legacy work, how obituaries, retrospectives, and institutions have framed him, what his family and estate have emphasized, and how fans can honor craft without airbrushing the rest. Post-2020, the story of Sean Connery has largely been written by two hands at once: remembrance and re-examination. Obituaries in major papers and academies led with the career, first Bond box office anchor, Oscar and BAFTA winner, knighthood, and then almost uniformly, folded in the uncomfortable parts. The 1965 Playboy quote, the 1987 Walters interview, his later repudiation, and Diane Salento's allegations with his denial. Family statements focused on a private man loved by those closest to him. His widow said plainly that he had lived with dementia near the end, and his death certificate later listed pneumonia and heart failure complications. Fans mourned across timelines and time zones. Scotland and Hollywood claimed him with equal fervor. Political leaders called him a national treasure, even as critics reminded readers why the record cannot be airbrushed. Institutions adjusted their tone in ways that signal how cultural memory is maturing. Television tributes and festival reels treated Bond as an artistic origin point rather than an excuse for nostalgia. When curators introduced the early pictures, some added a sentence that acknowledged the franchise's dated attitudes toward women, even as they praised its craft. Museum exhibitions and anniversary features celebrated tailoring, gadgets, and production design, while inviting panels to discuss how charisma became a kind of armor for male characters of the era. You did not need a disclaimer on every frame to feel the shift. The conversation around the images expanded, and Connery's presence became both artifact and lesson. The Bond brand stewarded his memory with care. The producers behind the franchise paid public tribute, calling him the man who changed cinema's pulse, and the actor who made their family business possible. Daniel Craig saluted him as the giant on whose shoulders the rest stood. That approach, honor the foundation, update the house, acknowledges that a blueprint can be brilliant and incomplete at once. Scotland's cultural institutions threaded a similar needle. Film festivals programmed Connery retrospectives that deliberately reached beyond 007, The Hill, The Man Who Would Be King, The Name of the Rose, The Untouchables, so audiences could see the craftsman apart from the tuxedo. Profiles returned to the Scottish International Education Trust he helped found in the late 1960s with his Bond earnings, a reminder that pay battles sometimes seeded philanthropy. News features also revisited the independence advocacy and the tax residency optics that shadowed it, usually without pretending the argument was legal rather than political. The result was something rare in celebrity memorials: warmth without amnesia. What did his family emphasize? Privacy, kindness, and discipline. The man who loved golf, hated fuss, prepared hard, and retreated from the industry rather than phone it in. Colleagues echoed that portrait. A star who could be brusque with press but generous with partners. A professional who hit marks, protected the scene, and brought gravity even to undemanding material. Those recollections do not cancel the harsher parts of the record. They round the person who generated it. For many fans, the combination produced a workable stance: keep the films, keep the receipts, and let the dissonance do its honest work. If you want a practical way to honor craft without airbrushing the rest, start with sequence and selection. Rewatch the Bond films as period pieces, then follow Connery into the 1970s and 1980s to see how he complicated that mask. Pair Dr. No with The Hill, Goldfinger with Robin and Marion, Diamonds Are Forever with The Untouchables. Read a page from Salento, alongside Connery's late-life repudiation of his old remarks. Sit with the discomfort before you hit play. That rhythm, context then cinema doesn't punish pleasure. It matures it. You will still find the cat-eyed cool intoxicating. You will also hear the quiet parts culture ignored when it crowned cool as virtue. This balance is what responsible obituaries tried to model and what responsible fandom can maintain. Legends are built from work we love and evidence we shouldn't overlook. Connery's case is unusually visible because the receipts are easy to quote and the roles are impossible to forget. The danger isn't that dark secrets hide in archives, it's that we let thumbnails replace reading. If the goal is to understand why his name still stirs argument 3 years on, the answer is not lurid revelation, it's that he embodied both the apex and the limits of a century's favorite masculine fantasy. The work remains thrilling. The record remains sobering. Holding both is how the story stays true. In the next section, we'll close the loop, how to spot and diffuse the rumor machine that keeps promising new secrets, a quick fact-check workflow you can run in under a minute, and a short map of sources to use when the next recycled claim hits your feed. Here's the balanced closing you can share without caveats. Sean Connery's life contains 2 stories that have to sit together to make sense. The first is the craftsman's arc. A working actor who became a global star forged the template for cinematic cool, fought for better deals, won major awards, mentored scenes with presence alone, and eventually chose silence over roles he didn't believe in. The second is the record that complicates the myth. His mid-century comments about slapping women, later repudiated, alleged abuse described by his first wife and denied by him, political optics about tax residency, and a Spanish property inquiry that never charged him. Hold both, and the silhouette stops looking like a poster and starts looking like a person. You can say, in one breath, that Connery altered the grammar of the blockbuster and that parts of what he embodied on and off screen belong to a worldview we're outgrowing. You can teach the films and name the harm. You can feel the thrill and keep a ledger of quotes and allegations that should sting. That's not fence-sitting. It's adulthood, and it's the only way a public memory stays honest when the performance was huge and the receipts good and bad are easy to find. Here's a short script you can read on air, or paste under a video when the recycled thumbnails appear. Sean Connery died in 2020 at 90. He helped invent James Bond on screen, and earned an Oscar for The Untouchables. The record also includes his harmful mid-century comments about hitting women, later rejected by him, allegations from his first wife that he denied, long debate over tax residency optics, and a Spanish property probe in which he wasn't charged. We can keep the films and keep the receipts. Legends are strongest when they're told whole. It's accurate, brief and resistant to sensational spin. If you're curating a Connery night, pair the hits with counterpoints, watch Dr. No, then The Hill to see the discipline stripped of tuxedo glamour, watch Goldfinger, then Robin and Marion to measure swagger against tenderness and age. Follow Diamonds Are Forever with The Untouchables to watch Kraft outrun caricature. Add a minute of context before you hit play. One sentence about the era's attitudes toward women, and one sentence about Connery's later statement renouncing his earlier remarks. Education doesn't blunt pleasure, it keeps you from confusing charisma with virtue, and it helps newer viewers decode what they're seeing. For creators, the packaging fix is simple and strong. Ditch dark secrets, unless you can point to a new document. Anchor your intro with dates, place allegation, denial, and outcome in one sentence. And link primary sources so your audience can check you. Use proportionate language. Alleged, denied, no charges. Later repudiated. If you want retention, build it from craft scene analysis, career turns, side-by-side clips, not from bait. You'll keep attention longer. Avoid legal scrapes, and model a kind of fandom that lets people grow past the reflex to turn every complex life into a jump cut. For fans, here's language that travels well in comments and conversations. Connery's films still thrill me, and I also can't ignore his old interviews or the allegations I've read. I hold both. Culture moves, we can too. That posture doesn't erase anyone's pain, and it doesn't demand you discard every poster on your wall. It invites grown-up memory, nuanced, dated, sourced. It also gives you a way to push back on recycled outrage without minimizing harm. Acknowledge, link, then pivot to the work's craft or to the industry changes we want the next generation of stars to embody. Connery's Bond will always be a lightning rod because it fused a brilliant cinematic invention with attitudes we're right to interrogate. The best outcome of that tension isn't cancellation or blind worship, it's calibration. Let the tuxedo stay iconic, but make sure the next tux fits a different ethic. Keep the raised eyebrow, lose the entitlement. Keep the competence, add accountability. Later bonds tried, future ones can try harder. That is how legacies teach rather than trap. We keep the parts that work, tell the truth about what didn't, and build better myths with the lessons intact. So we'll end where remembrance lands, with gratitude for craft, with clarity about harm, and with humility, to let both stand without a bow. Sean Connery's films remain a thrill to watch. The record includes words and claims that demand we watch with eyes open. That's not a contradiction to resolve. It's a balance to maintain. Keep dates straight, sources close, and tone proportionate. You won't need dark secrets to hold attention. You'll have truth, context, and the kind of maturity a legend deserves.